Right, there we go. I hope that's set up correctly. Yeah, so this is sort of like a talk about East Germany, but it's also a talk about the gap year. In fact, it was 2 years I ended up being away for, and it was after university, not after school, so I was like 23 years old, I think I was, 24 perhaps. But also I want to sort of like talk about life and like tell you people's life stories, because I'm fascinated by what people do with their lives and how they turn out and all this sort of stuff. So I was never really interested in languages. So I got grade C in French, in O-level French in 1983. My mother said that 40 years later that would be worth an A star, perhaps. But no, I was told that joke wouldn't go down very well. But anyway, so I just want to talk about, so why did I do this when I wasn't interested in languages? But now I'm an enthusiast. I'm really interested in linguistics and history and all of that stuff. So essentially what happened is that I went to Buckingham University, which is a private university. They do 2-year degree courses there, and they encourage you to learn a language. And I thought, well, that's a disadvantage. I don't want to do that. But I'd done my O-level French, and they offered French and German, so I thought I'd do German. And so I had a 3-month trip to Augsburg in 1987, and I was a beginner. But before I went, I used to have lessons with Mrs. Wagner, so I just need to talk about her. Now, she was the head of German at St. Swithin's, probably in the 70s, and she lived in Chorford. That's where I grew up at the time. And I think this is something I want to convey, is that the teaching of languages in schools, I think, is pretty dry. It's treated like another subject. You have to go and learn all your grammar. And I don't think that they really say to you, hey, if you learn a language, the world opens up to you. You can go and do stuff. And so also she was quite sort of like, she loved young people. And I'll give you an example of what she said once. So I thanked her once for a lesson, and as I was leaving, I said, look, thanks, you put so much time into me, I really appreciate it. And she says, well, that's okay, I don't have a husband, and I don't have a lover, so this is how I spend my time. So she's really sort of like got that spiciness in her. So Mrs. Wagner, by the way, she was an Austrian Jew, so she came over in 1938, and she never lost her strong German accent. And the reason why she's called Mrs. Wagner is because she married an Australian called Wagner. So it's a complete coincidence. So we used to call her Wags. Unfortunately, she died just at about the same time that I was getting good at German. So I was never able to. Oh, it's happened again, Max. So it's okay, leave it. When I need to do it, we'll get going. So I just want to tell you, so this is like my introduction. So I was interested in languages, but it's only when I went to Augsburg that the whole world opened up. So Augsburg was fantastic. I had a good time there. And I thought, well, maybe it's a good idea to learn a language in addition to everything else. So I always treated German as a hobby. I never properly studied it, although I asked the German department, there were 3 of us at Buckingham who got interested in languages. I'm still in touch with one of them, that's Patrick. The other one, Otto, that's my wife over there, by the way, so that you know who I'm talking to. As soon as he got married, I lost touch with him, and he turned up a few years later as a UK candidate for Edinburgh. So, but he never responded to my message, but so that was Otto for you. So learning German became my hobby, and I went to Germany a few times when I was at Buckingham University. And let me just tell you about one of the trips I did. Okay, this is where I need to get into the computer. So that's Mr. Wagner. And then on one of my trips, my uncle, that's my uncle's car. That's that's a friend of my brother's who I'm still friends with, by the way. He sells me my mortgages. So my uncle is changing cars, and it's Uncle Tony, and that's my son, by the way. And I asked him, could I borrow your car just to take it to Germany for a month? And he said, yeah, fine. And I couldn't believe it, because it's got a 3.5 litre engine. That's the top of the Range Rover. And I'm really into cars, by the way, or I was really into cars at that time. Now, Rovers are famous for being unreliable. So if I just go to, what has happened here? I need to maximise the screen. So remember, at the time, East Germany wasn't open up. So at this time, the world was much smaller, I would say, than what it is now, what with China opening up in Eastern Europe, etc. So my idea of a good time was to take my uncle's fast car to Germany and drive around and meet people and try and practice my German, and I absolutely loved it. The thing about, so I was interested in car mechanics and all of that, and I had 2 breakdowns in that car. The first time was, I need to explain, I'm really interested in the Second World War, and I've read lots of books about bombing Germany and about the Russian front and all of this. And I drive through German cities that I've read about being bombed, and I'd be in this car thinking, yeah, I'm a bomber pilot and all of this. And I had this smell of fuel in the car, and basically my fuel filter cracked, and it was spraying petrol onto the exhaust manifold, and the car could have caught fire. And so this was also part of this sort of like fantasy, you've got problems, you may catch fire. I pulled into a village, asked the guy for help, and this is the piece of rubber that he inserted where the fuel filter was, and I've kept that ever since in a drawer. But if anyone at home ever sees it, they won't know why it's there, but that's the reason, because I'm quite sentimental. So, and then the other one that happened is that's a fuel pump. That fuel pump went going up a mountain near Stuttgart. And I just got to the top of the hill when the whole engine conked out. But I had like a 5-mile descent going down, and I felt really good. I made it to the top of the hill. I've got to now get down, and I just freewheeled for miles down this mountain, and parked up in a village, and then hitchhiked from Stuttgart to Munich to go to a rover dealer to buy a fuel pump, which I spent all my money on, which wasn't very much. And I hitchhiked back, fixed the car, and then drove to Munich. And guess what I did there, because I didn't have any money. And this is where the gap year thing comes in. If the unexpected happens, you've got to be prepared to change your plan. So what do you do if you're in Germany and you need to earn money? There's 2 things. You can either teach English, and that's another story, or you can work in McDonald's. And working in McDonald's was brilliant. I really recommend it. And then all these people were my friends. And then you won't believe it, but the second day there, or the third day, hang on, why is this not working? Here we go. Does anyone know what that is now? That is the Oktoberfest. Now, I had no idea what was going on. All I knew is that the branch closed early at 5 o'clock or something. My shift started quite late, so that was quite an early close. All of the people from the branch nearest came to pub. And we all had to go to a beer festival, and it was like it's the annual works outing, and it was like my second day at work. And they were so generous, they gave us these coupons. We had complete excess of beer and half a chicken each, and it was such a good fun. And then this guy here, he's American. He was the boss of the branch. That guy is French, and the other guy was Indian. So those are the 3 managers of the branch. But I can't emphasise enough how good it is. And also, because it's all young people working there, everyone dates everyone else, so you instantly get girlfriends. So it's really good. Okay, now this is the next phase of my talk. So I do need to just talk a bit more about what was the world like in 1989. So when the Berlin Wall came down, for me it was totally unexpected. Would you agree that no one thought it was going to happen?
Yeah.
So East and West had been divided since 1955 or something, since the end of the Second World War. And so society, life in Western Europe, what was the world? The world was America and Western Europe. But Western Europe would be France, Britain and Germany. Spain was under Franco, so they weren't really important. They only started industrialising in 1975, I think. Italy was always a basket case. So your world was just your world was economically speaking. So what I'm trying to and also if you look at, like, I've got a map of Europe produced during the Cold War, and they have all the towns and villages in Western Europe, but when you look at the map of Eastern Europe, they only had the major cities. They didn't bother to have all the detail, and it really sort of like conveyed to you that there was nothing there. I remember with the other two guys at Buckingham, when we were learning German, we thought when we left university we'd want to take it further, and we actually had a meeting one night to try and work out, well, what should we do? And we tried to work out where can you speak German in the world, and we were talking about the Amish and about some town in Australia that was Germanville or something. But we never thought about East Germany though until the end of the conversation, and then we said, well, hang on a minute, look, there's a whole country there, there's East Germany. Why didn't we even think about this? And so we ended up writing a letter asking the East Germans if we could go and visit their country. And we got the letter back with applications for citizenship, which my mother was very worried about. She thought I was going to fill out the forms, and I sort of like pretended that I was going to do it just to annoy her a bit. So this, does anyone know, by the way, what that picture shows? No? Yes? No?
Checkpoint Charlie.
Checkpoint Charlie. It probably no longer exists now, does it? So, did they make a museum there? So Checkpoint Charlie, so in the British sector in Berlin, it was the British sector, wasn't it? That's where you went into East, that's when you left West Berlin to go into the East. And so that is like the frontier. But when I went there, so Berlin Wall came down, was it 7th of November? 9th of November, 1989. I went there in March 1990. And I would have gone sooner, except my plan was to sleep in the car. And I didn't want to go when it was too cold, I wanted to go when the weather was getting better. So that was like the frontier, and my objective that night, that wasn't the first time I went over because it was daylight when I took that picture. But that first time I arrived, I drove all across West Germany, all up that motorway which goes to Berlin, which takes ages. And by the way, I went via Hanover, Max. So Max lives in Hanover, yeah? And I was just saying, I went into McDonald's on Hildesheimstraße and asked them for a job, and they didn't have a job. And that's how I ended up in Munich. That's a part of that story now. Anyway, so my objective was to go over, meet someone there, and get invited back to their flat so I could sleep somewhere warm. And that's the sort of thing you do when you're young and on a gap year, and you don't care, you just want an adventure. And sure enough, basically the first person I met, we were instant best friends, and it worked a treat. So it shows. Oh, and one of the things about that, it's just one of my themes, is that in life, when you're travelling, you have a better time if you go alone. If you want to meet people, travel alone. It's so important. the best meetings I've had, the best stuff is when I'm travelling alone. So I went over, that was a postcard of the Berlin Wall, that's what it used to look like. That's me standing next to it 3 months later after it, and that's me on the wall. If you look at this picture here, that shows how it's made. It was like prefab concrete, that's the base. They just framed them into position. You see that sort of wall all over Germany, all over East Germany at the time. Very crumbly concrete. Here's some entrepreneur selling bits of Berlin Wall. I took a chisel with me and a proper builder's hammer, and I tell you, it was rubbish. You cannot cut your Berlin Wall piece off. I tried it. It goes to dust. Like everything else in East Germany, the quality was rubbish. Absolute rubbish. So I think what these chaps did is they went to building sites, got lumps of concrete, and then put bits of paint on. A far better way to make money. So I still meet people who've got bits of Berlin Wall on their mantelpieces at home, but I never tell them that story though. Just go to the next picture. Okay, so this other thing about the world. So when I went into East Germany, so this is where I ended up. This is my first sight of Jena. I didn't tell you why I selected Jena, but basically the week before I went to East Germany, I went around Winchester meeting people saying, I'm going to East Germany next week. And they said, oh yeah, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to go to Leipzig. Well, why are you going to Leipzig? Because Leipzig's in the middle of the town, of the country, so that'd be a good base. And then I met someone who said, oh, you should go to Jena. Because there's a guy there, I know, who's a student on an exchange program. And I thought, that's very good. How can I contact him? He said, well, I don't know how to contact him, but I do know that his mother sits in the kiosk of the museum up by the castle. And so I literally went up there, spoke to the woman in the kiosk, and I said, excuse me, is your son living in East Germany? And she said, yes. And I said, I'm going to East Germany, can I have his address please? And she gave it to me. And so I changed my plan just like that. So I drive into Jena, and the student area is right on the other side of town. So I had a purpose, I knew where I was going. But I didn't talk about the people though. So let me just talk about the people. So in a way I felt like Christopher Columbus, because no one had been to Eastern Europe. We'd only ever seen Russians in James Bond films, for example. As far as I was concerned, I was Christopher Columbus. Okay, well, I was discovering a new country, and I was amazing. It was fantastic. I was always looking at the people, and the first Russian I saw was, this picture was taken later. If you notice, it's a change of car. But the first Russian I saw, okay, oh, that's an old Russian truck. So that's a I reckon they were using those in the 1940s, but in the 1990s they were still using them. They're probably still using them now. Notice it's got CA written on the door. That's not a C, that's an S, SA, Sowjetische Armee. And then later, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they called it the Commonwealth of Independent States. So all of the army vehicles in Jena, they were repainted with 3 different letters, just for a few months. That's a later one. But there's always presence of the army. That is one of my students. Later I was teaching English at the university, and that shows the Russian army. They had 2 uniforms. That's the summer uniform. The winter uniform is like a coat, really heavy, low quality coat without buttons. They have these hooks on, because I managed to exchange one. I had a Russian coat at home, so I chucked it out. It was just hopeless. But what I found interesting about that is that in the winter they'd wear the winter uniform, in the summer they'd wear the summer uniform, but there was a certain date where it would change. So imagine only being able to have 2 sets of clothes, and on one day, so those poor guys, they had to wear lots of underwear if they were caught out. So met some So this is a typical group of East Germans. I get to Jena. But going back to that earlier picture, I didn't say that that was where the Soviet army base was. And I remember driving into the town, that was on the edge of the town, and there was like a watchtower with sentries. And they were the first Russians that I ever saw, the two sentries. And they were Asian, and they were short. And then all of the Russian soldiers were short. And I remember talking about this, why are they so short? And it was to do with the tanks though. There was a tank division, so they needed short people. That was how it was explained to me. But we later went to a party in Minsk. Irina is from Minsk, by the way. And we met a bloke who was my height. I was talking about his service in Germany. And he had been one of the guards on the Berlin Wall. And what I found out is that the Soviet army would place sentries on the Berlin Wall who were tall, so that they give an impression to Westerners looking over the wall, oh yeah, they're all tough, all those people. So anyway, there's a group of East Germans. The thing to remember with them is that they're wearing denim, because they thought it was cool. So they've been, is this true? In 1975, they were allowed to wear denim. That's what I heard.
Wasn't born yet.
So, yeah, I think there was some law was passed. They were suddenly allowed to wear denim in 1975. And they hadn't got bored with it by this time. Oh, it's done it again. And then this theme about people. So there's that one of the girls is actually an English girl, but he's Hungarian, and I think the other two are Polish. But the thing is that, again, if you've never met a Hungarian, or you've never met a Pole, you wonder if they're going to be different to you. You wonder if you've never met foreigners, you've only ever met Westerners, yeah? And so, but I was delighted to report that whenever I met anyone, they were completely normal. So yeah, but it takes you, you've got to experience it though, yeah? You know what I mean? It's, and this Hungarian, I think was so funny, but he could just tell me funny stories. He was learning English and German, and once he had to translate a text from English to German, and he wanted to say to the lecturer, but I'm Hungarian, why are you asking me to do this? So, anyway, so, better not put that there. There's the next picture. Okay, so now this is, on the left, this is Steffi. So I know Steffi very well. I ended up renting a room in her house. But actually the point of this picture is actually the bottle of beer. And that's why I'm showing it. It says Egelboy, so far as I can see. So in Jena at the time, there were 2 brands of beer produced by the local brewery. One tasted really bad, and the other one tasted even worse. When you went to a party, everyone would take the same beer with them, but we all knew which one was the better one. So everyone would drink the better one first and fight over it, and then when all that was gone, they'd say, okay, well now we better have the other one then. But it was really crap beer. Now, after monetary union, so the 1st of July 1990, I was living like a king, by the way, with Western money until monetary union. So the day before monetary union, I went to the local shop and bought a crate load of all this beer, like 2 crates, and think, well, at least I'll be okay for the next 3 weeks of beer. Not knowing that they didn't have like a preservative or something in it. So the beer, after a few days, it went really stale. And again, I just had no idea. I thought you could buy beer in the supermarket and it would last. But, in those days. I later met one of the guys who worked in the brewery. Basically, I said to him, why was your beer so shite? And he said, He said it's nothing to do with the equipment, nothing to do with our knowledge. It was all about the ingredients. We were given crap ingredients, and we did with it what we could. And that is like a summary for the whole country as well, by the way. Let's just move on. Oh yeah, so the other thing, here's a question for the Germans here. Fanta. Notice they're drinking Fanta. Does anyone know where that brand name comes from? Do you know? Sorry? It's to do with Nazi Germany, yes. So what happened was Coca-Cola had bottling plants in Germany before the Second World War. When the war started, the syrup that they needed to make the Coke with was stopped. And so the Coca-Cola executives in Germany had a meeting to invent a drink, but then they had another meeting where they had to make up a name. And the boss called everyone into the room and he says, benutzen Sie Ihre Fantasie. Fantasie is fantasy or imagination. And someone said, well, how about Fanta? So Fanta comes from fantasy, just so you know. Anyway, so the other reason why I wanted to show this picture, so my eldest son, who by the way is living in Cologne at the moment, and he doesn't want to come back, which is quite interesting. He's going to be 19 very soon, like next week. I sort of like discussed with him a few of the points I wanted to make in this talk. And he says, oh, you must tell them about the cracked glasses, which I didn't know was interesting, but he found it interesting. So basically, whenever you went into a pub in East Germany, the glasses would be so badly cracked that you'd have to carefully drink it, otherwise you'd cut your lips. And so that's another example of how rubbish the country was. They couldn't even have glasses that didn't cut your lips. It's probably the reason why everyone's drinking out of the bottle there as well, because the glasses would have been so awful.
And the glass is still rubbish.
No, after monetary union, the glasses changed overnight. Everything changed overnight. The 2nd of July, the 1st of July 1990 was different to the 30th of June. In fact, another example, there was this shop that sold gym equipment. And I thought, I'm going to go there and I'm going to buy everything in this shop. So I'll have a completely fully kitted out gym at home. And I got there, and all they had left was 2 10-kilogram weights. You know those 2 10-kilogram weights in the kitchen? So those are my East German. I was going to bring one to show you, but then I thought, no, can't bring a 10-kilogram weight with me. But it's really well made, though, I think, and I love it. And that's my East German thing, you know. So that was another change. And then, the other thing that just occurred to me was the food packaging. So the bin that we would put out was never full up. After July the 1st, 1990, all the food packaging with all the Western products, you'd just throw loads of rubbish away. Just like that. It's amazing. Right, so let's just move on. Okay, the reason why I'm showing this, I haven't told me the time. Okay, I better hurry up. Yeah. So I'm rambling now. Just very quickly, I lived in Mill Street in Judenstraße. This guy fancied himself as a mechanic, and he was at the bottom of the street. But anyway, this guy here, he was a deserter from the Russian army. He was a Ukrainian officer who didn't speak any English or German, but he was just hanging around in this guy's garage, just helping him do car mechanics. And he gave me his address in Ukraine, and I've still got it in the back of one of my German textbooks. And I always thought one day I'd go and visit him. But I wonder what he's doing now. And then...
Have you ever met the person whose address you obtained in Winchester?
Oh, I didn't tell that story, did I? So the bloke from Winchester, who was at Yale, I would go to his student block, knock on the door. I'd never met the guy. And an American bloke answered. And I said, hello, I'm Steve. is so-and-so here? And the American said, oh, no, he's gone to Poland for 2 weeks with his girlfriend. And I said, oh, that's just like old so-and-so. He's one of my best mates. and he said, oh, you better come in then. And then basically we went out to the pub that night. We went to a brilliant pub called St. Horsten Keller, which is underground and it's a student place. And on that first night I met people who I stayed friends with for the entire 2 years. In fact, I'm still friends with one of them now. And he lives in Berlin now and he's a doctor. Right, oh, this one, I just want to talk about telephones. I need to hurry up now so I can get through my stories. So, you had to be like 35 to have a telephone because you had to get into the queue to order a telephone. And so basically society for young people, no telephones. And the reason why I'm saying that is because your social life was organised through other means. So in the West, I would have like rung up my mate and said, I'll meet you in the Tudor Rose at 8 o'clock tonight. Fine, done. In East Germany, you just had to go and drive around and meet people. So, and that was what you did, and I never missed not having a phone. And I think there's a thing about technology here, maybe you'll agree, Jonathan, that these devices, which are supposed to make your life easier, they actually have a downside. They can make your life more complicated. You're always online, you know. Oh yeah, okay, this guy here. So, this guy on the right, he was the head of English in the English department at Yale University. He was born in 1930 and he retired in 1990 at the age of 60. He must have been a Communist Party official to be the head of English, but he didn't come across as a commie at all. He seemed like a favourite grandfather. Such a nice guy. He needed a volunteer. We had to go out into the countryside around Tübingen and give English lessons. And I really liked the guy. And so I always volunteered. And like we went to Karl-Marx-Stadt and delivered English lessons. But we were driving one day south of Jena. There was a bridge by the roadside, and it says, there's that bridge. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, in 1945, I was 15 years old, and I was enlisted for the last defence of the Reich. And there was a group of us, we were only 15, and we were told to defend this bridge. And that is the bridge there, ever we've driven past it. And but we had a talk, and we decided that the war was lost, and it would just be pointless. So we only had these armbands on. So we took the armbands off, we threw them in the river, and we started walking back to Jena. And just then, an SS patrol came along, and it said to them, what are you doing? Where's your Marschbefehl? And they said, well, we don't know, we're just boys. And this was really bad. They were shooting 15-year-olds for desertion. And just then, there was an American air raid on the bridge. So they were being strafed. And they managed to run away. And the SS didn't pursue them, they just let them go. But that was a close shave, I have to say. So, and he said that the first thing an English native speaker ever said to him was an American soldier saying, what time is it? He still remembers that. He found that the officers spoke good English and the men he couldn't understand when they spoke. But he ended up befriending all the Americans and they gave him lots of spam, which he buried in the field. And then later when the Russians took over that sector of East Germany, that's what saved him, because the Russians took all the furniture, all the goods, all the food, they left the Germans nothing. And it was really bad. And also, the Russian army was a complete rabble. So the Americans were professional, they had uniforms, they had equipment, they pulled out, Russians come in. and it's terrible, and they're a complete rabble. So he just told me all this in amazing detail. And the other one was Thomas. This is Thomas. He was one of my students. So in East Germany, if you wanted to study, you had to join the army for 3 years. And so all of my male students were 3 years older than the girls. But also I taught students who were doing English and Russian. But because I was a native speaker, the teachers wanted me to teach the older students, which I was very happy to do. So I was like 23 years old, I was. And all the students were older than me. Well, the girls were my age, the boys were 3 years older. Anyway, so he was competent. So we actually drove around Eastern Europe on a road trip once. So we spent a lot of time talking to each other about his life and stuff. And I told him about my life. I don't know whether I made an impression on him or not, but I'll tell you his story about when he was a border guard. So he joined the army for 3 years, but he was assigned to border protection duties. It turned out only to be for a week in the end, but at the time he didn't know that. So there's a platoon of about 12 people, and you're told that 2 of them are Stasi officers, but you don't know which 2 they are. You do marksman training, and so if you do well as a marksman, you get better privileges like better food or more leave. And so they know how good a shot everyone is. And then your job is they go out to the countryside and they've got 1 kilometre of wall with a minefield and barbed wire to protect. And in the night they walk up and down, but each time, every night for a week, you go with a different guy. You don't know if that guy is the Stasi guy or not. And then if you see someone trying to escape the country, your job is to shoot them. And then if you miss, but you've got your marksman's badge, then you've got trouble with yourself, basically. And so it was like he's living in a country which is like a prison, but he's part of a system where he's imprisoning himself, but he's part of a system which imprisons others. You know, it's quite horrific, really. There was also a thing he told me where there was some delegation. They came in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and the barbed wire was opened, and then east and western officials spoke to each other. It was really better I could witness that. Right, I think that's the end of that video.
How did you make to get a job? How did you get a job at university?
Okay, so how did I get my job at university? Basically, this is my main video, which I probably won't show now because I wanted to show my good video with my stories. But I've got lots of other stories though. But essentially, I met a girl at a bus stop called Anka, who I'm still friends with now. She lives in the south of France. And she was delighted to meet me because I was a Westerner, and she wanted to learn English. My brother ended up going out with her for about a year. Her dad was a professor of English at the university. He's died now. And he basically said to me, no, there's a vacancy at the university. You should apply for it. And they would only take people who had degrees in German to teach at the university. But because they were desperate and they'd given the job to someone who'd let them down and we had to start next week, I ended up getting the job. So that was really good for me.
Was he Stasi?
Yes. So yeah, he had a reputation of he was incredibly charming with me, but he was hated. He wasn't liked because everyone knew that he was a Stasi member in the English department. Yeah, but interesting. Yeah, so funny enough, the people in charge of the English department, they spoke the worst English, and so because they were promoted for the wrong reasons, basically. Right. So is it worth taking some questions, or if not, I can play this video. So, does anyone have anything they want to ask? We get a discussion going, perhaps.
Is German a harsh language?
Is German a harsh language? Okay, so I think the answer is no when you look at it in objective means. The problem with German is that everyone has learnt their German from war films. So, like my favourite war film, by the way, my favourite war film is Where Eagles Dare. Because when I went to, it wasn't always, it was only after I went to East Germany, because East Germany looked like the film set of Where Eagles Dare, because it was set during the war. Nothing had changed in East Germany since the 1930s. When you just speak normally to people in German, it's just like anything else. But people, their experience of German is listening to Hitler give one of his speeches, or watching war films where people are yelling their heads off. So the answer is German is not a harsh language. It gets a bad rap.
Was there anything good in East Germany, or was it all terrible?
Was there anything good? Well, you were good. So, shall I play this?
Yes.
I think it would be great.
I'm going to have a temptation. Oh, this. The temptation will be to pause it whenever I want to speak. But I don't know. So before I went, I made a mixer tape which I played in the car. So in those days, everyone got their music off the radio. We'd record the radio, make a cassette, and so the hits of March 1990 are indelibly formed in my brain. So this is March 1990, the B-52s. Oh, hang on.
Stop.
I need to go back to. Oh, hang on.
Who's that beautiful girl, Steve?
Hang on, I'm trying to pause it on the right bit. Right, okay. So that is the day I met my wife.
And she's wearing the same jumper?
And she.
You took a little while.
Irina kindly wore the same jumper that she was wearing the day that she met me for this talk. Isn't that lovely?
Whoa.
So,
Three boys.
and this is our middle
You
son.
see, if it wasn't for that man gap here from McDonald's, you know, it's good.
Wow.
So every picture there I could just talk for ages about, but does anyone have any questions about anything?
There's a picture of you with a blackboard behind you. Is that when you were teaching at the university?
Yeah, so I gave lessons at university. My job was to speak English, which I was very happy to do, and I'd make people. I used to draw up lists, a bit like this, where I'd just interview people. In fact, there's a guy there. One of the guys in the picture, he looked weird and a bit dark-skinned. He was called Kevin, and he was from America, and we both arrived in Jena at about the same time. It's quite interesting how our lives diverged. So we were both English native speakers. The day that he arrived, he befriended a man who took him back to his flat, and in the night he stole all of Kevin's money and fled to the west. So Kevin was in the situation where he had no money and no ID, no passport, but he had a flat. So he had somewhere to live. Now my situation is that I had a car, and up until the 1st of July I had enough money to live like a king. And then all that got wiped out. So from the 1st of July onwards, we were on level pegging, and I had to get a job. And so in fact I didn't do it, my landlady Steffi, who's in one of the earlier pictures, she put an advert in the local paper offering my services as an English teacher, which I was quite annoyed about because she didn't ask me first. But we had 18 replies, and from the 18 I got it down to about, basically I was doing one lesson a day, earning 18 marks an hour. I'd drive out to the customer, so I'd learn all the streets in Jena. And I was paying Steffi 10 marks a day to live. And so the 8 marks was my profit, so to speak, and I put that in the tank. So I had enough money to drive the car around and live, but no money to eat. So I had to go and visit people at lunchtime. But there was a story where, so in the morning, Steffi would only buy the exact amount right of food every day. And she lived in a place where her mother lived downstairs with an old grumpy man. And I never really knew what the story of this old grumpy man. But one day I'm absolutely starving. Steffi had gone to work, and I'm going around the kitchen. There's no food in there at all. I haven't eaten anything. So I went downstairs to the flat downstairs, and this grumpy man was there. And I said to him, I need bread. Do you have any food? I need bread. I'm hungry. And he went and got me some bread, and it was all fine. And then later that night, Steffi said, during the war, he had been really hungry once. And the British had actually saved him, and they fed him. But it had been bad for him during the war. And when I was coming down, I was speaking with an English accent, saying, I'm starving, I need some bread. And it sort of like brought that back, So, does anyone know the film? Oh, if anyone's, I'm going to keep talking unless anyone wants to say anything. We've got 5 minutes, we can finish early or late. Does anyone know the film Dances with Wolves? You know.
I know.
Kevin Costner. So it was in the cinema in East Germany in about 1990. he plays an American, it's in the US Civil War. During the days of the frontier, he goes through a mental breakdown. He ends up going out west and living on his own near some Indian reservation. And basically, they don't kill him because they think he may be useful because he's a Westerner and he knows the Westerner's language. And he joins the tribe, basically, and he learns to speak the Indian language. And I went to see this at East Germany, and I said, yes, yeah, this is just like me. I'm like Kevin Costner, going and learning the language and interacting with the natives, you know. So there's that. And then, yeah, I mentioned, I mean, I've got so much more to say, but it'd be nice if someone could engage and ask a question. Yes.
Did you ever think about staying out in Germany?
Yeah, all the time. So as I said, my son is there now. He's supposed to be on a gap year, and he was supposed to reapply to Durham University, but he didn't even get an offer from Durham. And the trouble I've had with him to do his UCAS form this year, his heart isn't in it. He's incredibly happy in Cologne. He's on the coolest course with the coolest people in the coolest part of town, and he's happy. I had a really long chat with him today, by the way, but he's so grown up now. He's going to be 19 next week. But I thought about it all the time. It's just, if you're happy, it's nice to be a foreigner sometimes in a foreign country because you feel special. Especially in Germany. Germans are so civilised, they're so like the British. Well, the northern Germans are like the British. Yeah, but I came back to England because I got married and I really wanted to live in England, basically.
Oh, it's all mine.
Yeah, I mean,
All your fault.
Yes.
so
George, we'll be speaking German now, you know.
yeah, you could have come out German. Yeah. So I don't know if you noticed in the video there was an East German Olympic long jumping champion called Heike Wexler. Did anyone?
We saw that, yeah.
So she lived in Jena, and she was one of my students. So I taught her some English. So I feel quite special.
She's very famous.
Is she very famous? Yeah, okay, yeah. So quite nice to know someone famous.
What would you advise for in terms of the gap year? Because you've done a gap year afterwards.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. Right, I was going to put this in, so it just reminded me before we finish. So I think what I did was amazing, but at the time I thought it was normal. I didn't know it was amazing until people told me years later, hey, what you did sounds pretty amazing. Because my parents were quite against me going there and all this rubbish. And you know, the fact I learned the language. I mean, in 1992, I spoke better German than any non-native speaker that I met. And I met a lot of people who were doing German. And when I first got there, I was rubbish. And that's what made me motivated to learn the language. And I really got good at speaking German when I had got my second job. And I taught English to normal East Germans who were all made unemployed. So the 1st of July 1990, all these massive unemployment, all these factories closed down, and the entire country had to go on a training program, and it was called ABM, Arbeitsbeschaffungsmaßnahmen, and I was a part of that. And one of the new skills they needed was English, because they hadn't really taken English that seriously. And so I could basically name my salary. And in fact, I could tell you a story about how I negotiated. It's quite nice when you don't really want a job and you're negotiating, and the guy's desperate for you and you don't really care. And so I kept on saying I want more money, and he kept on saying that's okay, that's okay. And then when we finally settled on what I was going to be paid, I said, right, okay, we agreed that. Oh, by the way, when am I starting? And he said, you're starting tomorrow. And I had no idea, so they were desperate for an English teacher. And I had to teach the class, because it was all new and they didn't have enough teachers, I had to do the morning and the afternoon session for this private training. It's a bit like doing what I'm doing now, this same number of people. And I had 2 classes, beginners in English and a bit more advanced. And I did all my teaching in German. And I'd explain everything in German, and it was fantastic for me. So the first time that I was dreaming in German was the night after my first day of work, teaching English to Germans in German. So that was revelatory, actually. So, and I got paid for that as well. You know, it's amazing. Yeah. And also about speaking a foreign language, because I've got to stress I was never really into linguistics or anything, but now I'd love to study Indo-Europeans, I'd love to study Proto-Germanic. I'm actually on a Facebook group where we discuss words and what their derivations are. I'm really into it now. It's just a completely new thing. But the other thing I want to say is about swearing. So, because I stopped learning German in 1992 because I started learning Russian. I learned Russian for 13 years. But I don't actually know any Russian swear words. I tried to learn Russian swear words, but I don't feel them. But I love swearing in German. Can I swear in German? I love saying Arschlöcher, but you know, because you feel the language, you know. And then, but really, when you really know that you speak a language, when you cut your finger, which I did today, and you say Arschloch or Scheiß, yeah, because that's when you know your reaction. It means you're not thinking. It's a reaction. So I've got to finish this, haven't I? But has anyone watched Deutschland 1983? Oh, come on, girls. Okay, it's a brilliant thing. But the thing that came out of that, I was watching it with my eldest son who's in Cologne the other night because he was home for Christmas. I didn't realise that the German word for orange was orange until I watched Deutschland 1983. Because I'd always said Apfelsine. Yeah? So they actually have different words for an orange, and you know. The other word I was always using was planmäßig. Alles läuft ganz planmäßig. So there is their German, their 5-year plans. So I think I better stop talking. If no one stops me, I'm going to keep talking. Or,
That's very good.
so I think that's the end.